Right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. We're going to make a start now. Welcome to the Salesforce release webinar, Spring 20 highlights. Yet another Salesforce release, over 500 pages of release notes for this release. It might be my age, but these releases seem to come round quicker and quicker every year. Bob Buzzard and his alter ego, Keir Bowden, are sitting next to me, and he'll soon be starting and going through the release with you. Usual rules apply. Apologies in advance for any the customary emergency vehicle sirens that may pepper the webinar, but we'll tough it out. Any questions? I'll add those into either the questions or the chat section of the webinar console. I'll field those, and then we'll share those with Keir at the end, and he'll attempt to answer them. If not straight away, then post webinar
through the medium of an email sent later.
Correct. All right. Well, without any further ado, Bob, you're on.
Thank you very much, Clive. A wonderful introduction as always. Here's our agenda. So let's get straight on. Our first topic is Hasta la vista, previously known as fond farewells. This is where we wave features off into the sunset as they're being retired. So customizable forecasting is retiring in summer 20. This has been known for a while, so we've been talking about it for a while. So the next release is the last time, or probably this release is the last time that we'll actually say that it's going to be retiring. That's in around 4 months' time, early June. The recommended approach is to switch to collaborative forecasting. The original territory management functionality is also leaving us, but that's in summer 21 release, so that's June 2021. So you have a bit longer to deal with any fallout. Again, the advice is to move to the new territory management functionality. Einstein Discovery Classic is being replaced with a new experience in the Spring 20 release. You'll need to talk to Salesforce about switching to this, as you may need to change your license. Cloud Flow Designer is no longer available and is replaced by the Lightning Experience Flow Builder, which is a lot better in my opinion. The Data.com Prospector and Clean licenses can no longer be renewed and will retire at the end of July. As I've said before, I don't think Data.com got much take-up in Europe, so I doubt too many people on this call are affected. Okay, so next up we have some general changes. First off, supported browsers. I won't go through all of these, but a key point is that if you've extended support for IE11, you've got less than a year of that left. The Turn on Lightning Experience critical update. So if you've been to any of our webinars in the last year or so, you'd have seen us talking about this most of the time. So this has been enabled and it's been applied on a rolling basis, starting with sandboxes. It started in January, so it's likely that you would have seen it in production. If you haven't yet, it is imminent. So this affects all users with the Lightning Experience user permission. So when this is enabled, these users will be switched to the Lightning Experience on a weekly basis. They can switch back to Classic at any point in time, but they will be put back into the Lightning Experience the following week. If you don't want this happening to your users, turn the Lightning Experience user permission off. And if you can't turn it off because you're using standard profiles, you can clone these to custom profiles and then turn the permission off. Admins will see what the release notes describe as gentle reminders to continue progress towards the Lightning Experience. So these are prompts that appear on the bottom right of the screen and linked to the transition assistant. You can turn these off through the user interface setup menu. Prompts. So prompts were generally available in Winter 20, and they've got a few enhancements in this release. You can restrict the display of specific prompts to users with specific profiles or permission, or a specific permission. You can choose up to 10 items. If you choose profiles only, then the prompt will be displayed to users with any of the profiles. If you include permissions, the prompt will be displayed to users with all of the permissions and any of the profiles. You can also add video URLs to docked prompts, and when you do that, as shown in the example here, it will display inside the prompt when it appears. The floating prompt body text can now contain up to 240 characters, and you can also change the global prompt delay time to make them appear more frequently or to space them out a bit more. So the default is no more than once every 24 hours, but you can change this to between 0 and just under 100 hours. I'm not sure what happens if you put it in 0. I would imagine it doesn't show every time a user does anything, but you'll probably see them more often than you want to. You can also choose to ignore the global delay time altogether by choosing to display a prompt as soon as the page loads. A couple of items of feature parity for the recycle bin. So you can now empty this via the empty org recycle. Sorry, you can empty the org recycle bin via the button on the top right, and also, as is highlighted just there, on the webinar report, reports and dashboards now appear in the Lightning recycle bin, whereas previously you had to flip back to Classic in order to be able to see those in the recycle bin. So one less reason to switch back to Classic. The app launcher has some changes. It now shows your top apps when it opens rather than everything, and then you can click on View All to see all items. When you click on View All, it takes you to a fairly familiar page. However, there is a couple of slight changes here. So the bit tagged with item 1, that shows that truncated descriptions don't break in mid-word. It'll always break in the spaces between a word. And also item 2, that's a drag handle. So if you're going to rearrange the applications, move them around, it's clear how you do that and what you grab onto. You can now clone an opportunity or a campaign and its related records in the Lightning experience. So here's a screen grab of an opportunity which has a related product and a related contact role. So on the record header is the clone with the related record button. If I click that, then I get to choose which related records that I want to add when I actually clone that opportunity. Surveys next. So you can now insert a response from a previous question to remind a user of their answer, for example, or to personalize a follow-up question. Surveys can auto progress to the next page when the last question on the current page has been answered. You don't have to force people to click a next button if you're currently doing that. Welcome, thank you, and question pages can now include images, which you insert via the rich text editor. And the net promoter score is now color-coded to make it clear what the rankings mean. Obviously, people were struggling with 0 meaning not at all likely and 10 meaning extremely likely. So now there's another indicator as to what that means. Surveys also now support conditional questions. So this is pretty cool, actually. So showing or hiding questions based on previous responses. So the surveys can effectively become like reactive forms. And if someone says there's an area they're not interested in, you can skip all the questions that relate to that particular area. In a similar vein, they support branching logic. So given the user's response, you can send them off to a specific page based on the answer. So in this case, we've got, based on the conditions, it will be sent to page 3. If it's less than or equal to 3, how would you rate our service? So I guess that's something, if you're getting a low rating, that can take off to another page to go and immediately find out more about that. Another really cool feature, huge improvement to record create in my opinion, being able to pass default values for the newly created record on the URL. So for those of us that remember Salesforce Classic, this is basically the kind of thing we used to refer to as URL hacks, but it's actually supported, and also it only works on the record create at the moment, as far as I'm aware. So in the example here, I'm accessing the new account functionality via a URL, and I'm specifying the name field as webinar account. As you can see, the default field values are bolded there. And then on the page that's actually appears, my webinar account is pre-filled. So any way you can basically direct somebody to that page, you can use those URL values. So that can be a link, a button, a URL from elsewhere, something in an email, for example. You could certainly do all those kind of things. Enhanced lists are now generally available. So we've talked about these in the beta sections before. So basically, an enhanced list is something that you choose via the Lightning App Builder, so it's not standard page layout functionality. And you also choose the number of records that you want to display in the list. So I've chosen 10 here. So I'd get 10 items there when I actually access the products related list. The enhanced can also define if the action bar shows on the list. So the bit at the top right there, you can reduce what shows there. I think it still leaves 1 or 2 standard system things, but most of it goes. And the enhanced list can display up to 10 fields, 10 columns effectively, but you have to configure those via the page layout editor as you would for other related lists. That's the end of the general section. So moving on to Sales Cloud. Opportunity scoring is now available for all users with a Sales Cloud license. You don't need to pay any extra, but you do have to turn it on. Tasks can now be assigned to a queue and dealt with by any member of that queue, which I also think this is a really cool feature, because I've been implementing workarounds for this since about 2008, which would spread off and assign loads of, if we wanted 10 people to be able to potentially deal with a task, we'd create 10 tasks. The first one to complete it meant the others got deleted, etc. So really nice to see that. I think that's going to retire a fair bit of code. And you can customize the account and opportunity team related lists, which is another feature parity change for classic with classic Lightning experience. Some email changes. When sending list emails, you can search for the contacts via their related account field, so you don't have to just search on contact fields. And you can also save list emails as drafts and come back to finish those later. Row level actions are now available for records displayed on the template homepage. So those are the row level actions there on the sort of far right. And the timeline now groups emails by thread. So you can see here, I've got forward first email. There's several replies, and they're all now nicely indented. So it's easy to see they're all related to each other. Opportunity contact roles now have process automation support, so you can use them in flows, process builders, workflow rules, and you can use them as the target object that actually triggers the automation, or you can use them as an action as something to take action on as part of that automation. So nearer to a first-class citizen again. Few product changes. The dashboard in B2B marketing analytics shows the engagement weightings that influence Einstein behavior scoring. So if you're using that, you can find out a bit more about what is actually contributing to that. And the embedded engagement history dashboard, which is available as a Lightning component, can be added to lead and contact pages to see engagement activity, or to campaign records to see the most engaged accounts. And the engagement activities related list on a list email now shows who has been opening those emails, which is quite useful to know. So next we have Service Cloud. Einstein article recommendations are now generally available. So basically you configure relevant fields on case and knowledge articles to associate them with each other. Einstein then identifies the information on the case record, matches it to articles in the knowledge base, and shows recommended articles to agents via the Lightning knowledge component. Bots next. Bots now support conditional messaging via a rule dialog configuration. So here, depending on what the user puts in for their CSAT, that then generates an appropriate message back to them rather than a standard one, regardless of what they chose. Chatbots can now display a typing indicator when processing responses to indicate to the user that their conversation is continuing. So that's kind of the three-dot moving ellipse, this kind of thing you'd see on something like any kind of mobile messaging service. And there's an upgraded model management dashboard, which has actionable recommendations to help you train your bots faster. Next, some knowledge improvements. So you can insert an article URL into a conversation via a standard case action. You can tailor these inserted articles by showing or hiding labels. And if you're inserting it into an email, you can choose to skip related files. If you're using the Chrome browser, Chrome only I'm afraid, you can resize images in rich text fields. You can set the default access level for files attached to articles, using set by record to make them available to everybody who can see the article. And the maximum data categories per article has been increased to 50 from 25. If you want to go over the standard 8, you still have to talk to Salesforce, but you can ask for more than 25 now. Omnichannel supervisor filters are now sticky and they persist across login sessions, so that's quite good. Once you've got the set up, you can then reuse them in future sessions rather than having to redo it every time. You can automatically minimize the widget when an agent accepts work to maximize their real estate. That's just a setting on the service channels there. And you can now route a chat directly to an agent, even if they're not part of the queue that the chat is currently residing in. So if you know who it should go to, you can choose who it goes to, regardless of what they might think about whether they should receive it or not. Cases. So case merging is now generally available in the Lightning experience. So you can choose to soft delete the losing case to move it to the recycle bin, or you can keep the cases that have been merged and still have visibility of them. If you keep them, agents can see them via the merged cases related list. Also, when a case is escalated, a marker, the kind of little red up caret there, is added to the subject to make the state clearer, so you can see at a glance what the problem is, or that it's been escalated rather. You can insert code samples into emails sent via the case feed. So if you're sending technical solutions, you can do that from a single place. And you can now view and edit cases when hovering over a record in a list view. So in this particular case, there's case 1010, hovering over that, then pulls out the details in a pop-up rather than requiring me to click through and see the full details. Some other Service Cloud, bulk macros are now available in the Lightning experience, giving feature parity with Classic. Macros on a record homepage now run in the background and show a toast message when they are complete, so they don't tie you up quite so much. And you can filter the history tab of the actions and recommendations component by status. Next, analytics. You can exclude the disclaimer from formatted export reports. This applies across the org, so you can't use it on specific reports, unfortunately. It's all or nothing. And also, when editing a report or creating a report, you can choose to disable auto preview. So what this means is when you make changes, it won't automatically refresh the example data. And you'll be able to see that because the details have a grey overlay and you're reminded that you need to refresh to see the latest results. But if you've got quite a lot of edits to make, the constant refreshing can be a little bit annoying, so this should speed things up a little bit for you. Field-to-field filters are GA, another cool feature. Been a few of them in this release. So these allow you to filter records based on the value of one field in relation to another on the same record. Previously, we burned custom fields to capture the outcome of the field comparison, and then we had to filter on that. So again, this should give us back a few custom fields on some of our older systems out there. So here's a report of some requests that have been made in a fictional company. And then what I'm going to do here is add a field-to-field filter to restrict to records where the completed date is less than the deadline, so where they were completed earlier ahead of expectation. So at the moment in that report, there's 6 in there. Once I apply the filter, it's only 4, and all the requests that were dealt with in a lax fashion have been hidden away to make everything seem a lot better than it really is. Counting unique values is also generally available. So you set this up via the drop down in the column on the report builder, as you see here, show unique count at the bottom of the top section of that drop down. And in this report, I've grouped my accounts by revenue, and you can see that I've grouped my accounts by revenue, and then I've gone for the unique count in the account type, and you can see that I've got 3 different account types: demo, prospect, and technology partner, even though I've got 4 records. So Einstein Analytics changes. So the Einstein Analytics Plus license, the row limit has been increased from 1 billion rows to 10 billion rows, which should be enough for most people, I think. You can sync from data sources connected via MuleSoft and also integrate Customer 360 data. If you don't know what Customer 360 data is, take a look at the keynotes from Dreamforce. Salesforce data syncs are now more granular, so you can configure up to 10 local connections, and you can define a schedule for each of those. And you can also filter data synced from external connections now. You can save up to 100 separate data flows, which is up from 30 in the winter release. If you've got data flows in sandboxes or developer editions, these are now automatically removed 90 days after the last edit. So the idea is that you were just doing that to test something rather than actually needing it to run regularly. I guess if you want to keep those, just set yourself a reminder every 89 days to go and change something and change it back, and it will continue on. There's a new direct data feature, which allows you to query live Salesforce data. Sounds quite nice. And the new publisher feature, again, another quite cool feature, allows you to work on a new version of a dashboard collaborating with other people. So it's not just limited to you, but it's not visible to the wider world until you are ready to publish it. So it's a good way of having a draft dashboard while you're revising a live version. Einstein Analytics is now available in the new Salesforce mobile app, so you won't necessarily need 2 applications. And finally, packaging and change sets now include user-extended metadata. So this is the mechanism for customizing dataset, field, and value formatting in dashboard and lenses. So you can now package that or migrate it between orgs. Moving on to communities. Reporting is now available in Lightning Communities, so users can view reports and they can create them via the report builder, as long as they have the partner license or the customer community plus license. So it's the more expensive end of the licenses that you need to do this. You can specify the API name for a page so that you can use it in programmatic navigation. And you can create and publish communities in Scratch orgs, so those developing with DX should find that a real time saver. And also you can enable login with Apple ID for your community users, but you will have to create an Apple auth provider in order to fully enable that. You can reorder flexible layout sections in the builder by dragging them to the desired location. You can display a warning when users with unsupported browsers attempt to access a community, so give them a kind of nicer knockback than just sending them off elsewhere, or giving them a just giving them some kind of internal error. You can display a nice warning to them. After viewing the detail of a post or a comment in the feed in a community, you'll now return to your previous position in the feed rather than taken back to the top of it, which could be a bit annoying. And you can verify the ownership of the community domain should you need to do that in order to enable other things like other authentication providers, for example. Lightning Web Components can now run in a community with the locker disabled, as long as they have this Lightning Community Relaxed CSP tag. You can turn the locker service off for all components in a community. You can also limit external user access to APIs, and you do that by requiring them to have access to a connected application. And you'd have to contact Salesforce to enable this, though. And then a bit of renaming. Community workspaces have been renamed Experience Workspaces, and Community Builder has been renamed Experience Builder. I actually think I may have been at a session where we came up with those names, or at least they were the names I voted for, so you can probably partially blame me for that. And finally, Internet Explorer 11 for Experience Workspaces, previously known as Community Workspaces, ends with this release. Next up, mobile. So the new mobile application is going to be rolled out to all users in Spring 20. You don't have to enable this. There are no permissions to assign, but you also can't stop it, which is slightly unusual, but I'm guessing the Salesforce have good reasons for this. If you've got people who are used to the set of tabs, etc., that they had and liked the way they worked, the mobile-only app has the tabs that the users would have previously had access to. As a reminder, this is what the new app looks like. So if you see the chatter actions near the top, then you have it. It requires iOS 12 plus or Android 6 plus, and the shortcode shown there links to the list of devices used for testing. If your device isn't on that list, it doesn't mean it won't work. It just means that Salesforce may decline to provide support if you have any issues. Access via the web browser on the mobile device to Salesforce ends in the summer 20 release. So it's installed applications only going forward. As mentioned earlier, you can access Einstein Analytics via the new mobile app. For those using the tablet experience, that currently provides a narrow view. I don't know how long that's been for, but in Spring 20, you get the option to switch back to the old view, which was a wider view. So if that's a problem, see if that helps you. And you can now customize a bit more of the navigation bar, as I'll show on the next slide. So basically, the mobile-only app contains the first 4 items of the navigation menu for the mobile app. So that, as I say, that will be really familiar to people who've used that before. For Lightning apps, it'll give a degree of feature parity with the desktop, and it will contain the first 4 tabs from the desktop version. So you can see here on the main desktop, it's Opportunity Leads Task Files. On the mobile device across the bottom, Opportunity Leads Task Files. And then in the app launcher on the mobile device, the sales application, again, you can see Opportunity Leads Task Files. So consistency across that. And if the user has permission to customize the navigation bar, this will sync to their mobile application if they do that on desktop. And there is also a share link on all shareable records, and that opens the standard options to socialize a link that if you've ever shared something from, I don't know, Twitter or a website or something like that, you'll have seen that before. Next up, customization. So Lightning App Builder now gives guidance and tips while you're building your page. So here it's basically saying you've already got that component here, you've got some empty regions, yada, yada, yada. So that could be quite helpful, especially for people that are new to it. And also you can have up to 100 components per region, which is up from 25 in the Winter 20 release. Another really cool feature, before save flows. So these are effectively things that you do to a record before it hits the database after the user has made a change to them, for example. So these are really fast, 10 times faster than the equivalent process builder, it is claimed. Certainly my own investigations have shown that they seem to be quicker in terms of CPU than a trigger. There is some debate about exactly why that is, so I guess there may be some issues in there as well. There is a limited set of actions that you can do with this. Basically, you can do assignment, you can look at another record, you have a decision and a loop. So you're not going to fully replace process builder or triggers just yet with these. And you can also choose what causes the flow to run. Is it on a record create, update, or both situations? A bit more on flows. Action and create record elements no longer need variables created to store the output values. You can define them if you want. You can automatically store all fields from a get record. That's a bit annoying if you come from an Apex background like me, because there's never been any way to do that in Apex. You can't do a select star from record, but flows have that capability now, so that's good. You can deactivate a flow without leaving the builder. And you can also run flows in system context, which means that it'll ignore object and field level permissions, a bit like running Apex, which does much the same thing. And duplicate updates to records have been removed. So these used to run and contribute to limit problems because they had a maximum of 12. So hopefully you'll hit less of these in the future if you are currently hitting those. Invocable Apex from flows can now support generic S-objects, so a single action can be created that works against multiple S-object types. The admin just chooses the S-object type target when they use that action. And for anyone that's interested, this is what the code looks like. So basically, my request contains a list of generic S-objects, and then some code later on will then actually turn that into the appropriate, or figure out what type it's been passed and take appropriate action. Next up on customization, this is something that I've been really looking forward to since I saw it. It's just another kind of step forward in the whole permissions and privileges, etc. So originally we had profiles, and if you want to do something slightly out of the ordinary for one user, you needed to create another profile, which meant you got loads and loads of those. I think one of our customers had about 170 profiles back in the day. Then we've got permission sets, which gave a bit more granularity. Permission set groups allow permission sets to become a bit more reusable. So rather than doing something like this and having 3 separate permission sets that are individually assigned to a number of sales users, they can be combined into a sales staff permission set group, and then that can be assigned to those users in one go. So effectively, permission sets can be assembled into kind of super groups for specific sets of users, and still reused across different users. So that should help things enormously, I think. To make them even more reusable, you can create muting permission set to turn off the odd position from the group set. So if you've got something, you've got a set of things which are almost perfect, but you just need one of those permissions gone, you don't have to create yet another permission set that has all of them minus that one. You can just have a muting permission set that turns it off. You can only have one of those per permission set group. And finally, on permission sets, there's a new confirmation screen that summarizes the changes that you've made before you save. Basically because it's quite complicated, the permission set UI, and it's quite easy to lose track of what you've actually done. Next, a solution to the problem of sensitive data in sandboxes, the data mask. So basically this protects private data in your sandboxes, and it can do one of 3 things. It can anonymize, so replace with just random characters. So that is, I've got an example there of replacing my name with some gibberish. It can pseudonymize, which replaces it with an appropriate value for the field, but unrelated to the original values. So in the case here, my surname is Bowden, and it then goes for a generic surname of Jones. I haven't seen the full details of this, but I'd imagine it avoids changing the field to the same value or the value of another field. So if you have a Tom Jones in there, you don't change Keir Bowden into Tom Jones and still have it representing a real person. And finally, there's deleting, which basically just removes the contents of the field. So an email would go from that to nothing. So data mask executes when a sandbox is refreshed. And it's one way. You cannot undo this. It can't be reverse engineered. Checkbox, lookup, and pick list fields are not supported. Checkbox, which is true or false, would be quite a challenge to anonymize, pseudonymize, I think, and it only has 1 of 2 states. If you mask the username field, nobody will be able to log in, so don't do that. And this requires an additional license, and as I understand it, it's a paid extra, but check with your account executive to confirm that, because there's not an awful lot of information. And I'd also ask about field history tracking if you're talking to your AE as well. So if field history tracking is enabled and it does the pseudonymizing, does it retain in field history the original value, thus unfortunately not hitting the total anonymization side of things. Moving on to privacy, some new objects to manage an individual's communication subscriptions. I won't read through them because I don't have anything additional to say about them really. And the second bullet point there, using the contact point email and contact point phone objects, you can associate multiple email addresses and phone records with a single customer. Guest users are going, you might have seen some of this on Twitter, guest users are going into lockdown in Spring 20, losing quite a lot of the privileges that they've enjoyed in the past. Obviously, there's some security concerns about this back at the mothership. So a guest user can no longer own new records that they create. These will switch to a default owner that is configurable. But if you don't define one, it will be the user that created the site. As of March the 1st, a security alert will activate that makes all web defaults private for a guest, and they can only be given read access via guest user sharing rules. Guest user sharing rules are like criteria-based sharing rules. I've been setting up a few of them recently. They're not that difficult to deal with, so it shouldn't be too much of a problem. If you've got a lot of your org opened up to guest users, then it's probably a good thing that you're having to lock this down, in all honesty. As of summer 20, you won't be able to have guest users update or delete permissions to any object. So that could be an issue if you've allowed somebody to create a record as a guest user and then at some point in time come back and update it. They won't be able to do that. They also won't be able to have view or modify all. Again, if you've given that permission to a guest user, you've probably got some bigger problems. There are also a number of other permissions that are being removed, all fairly minor ones, but you can check out the detail at the short link shown. So moving on to our final section for generally available features, my favorite as always, development. Lightning Web Components no longer need @track decorators on primitive properties, as these are now all tracked automatically. You still need this if you want to track changes to the contents of an object and array, but aside from that, you don't. Lightning Web Component styles can now use Aura tokens. And any changes made to components in a Scratch org are now tracked and so can be pulled back to your local file system. It's quite an interesting one because you can't actually change Lightning Web Components directly on the org. So I don't know what this is tracking. And anything I can think of is if you've got multiple people working in the same Scratch org, which again would be an unusual thing. But maybe there's going to be more capability to do stuff with Lightning Web Components going forward. Aura components in the UI namespace are deprecated and support will end in May 2021. They will continue to work as they currently do, but if you encounter problems in a new usage, Salesforce may decline to help you. Lightning components have some critical updates. So access to Aura-enabled methods in Apex classes will be disabled by default, and you will have to enable access to the classes via profiles or permission sets. This applies to guest, portal, and regular users. The dates of these seem to have been a little bit all over the place prior to this release, but now they've all settled on summer 20. Originally, the guest and portal users were going to go early, but that changed a couple of days ago. So basically, summer 20 or enable methods will only be accessible as long as if the user has permissions to access them. Apex assets modifiers are respected in summer 20. I wasn't aware they weren't being respected, so it's a good thing, I think, that loophole's being closed. And only global methods will be accessible from managed packages as of summer 20. And again, that's how it's supposed to work. So it sounds like an update that does for actually fixing a bug. The base Lightning components are going open source. Base Lightning web components are going open source. So these are basically transpiled, which means compiled to a different language, versions of the components that will be available in your local namespace in the C-namespace. So you're not basically getting versions of the base components that you can take over in your org. You're getting replicants of them that you can then tweak. So the recipes repository at the short link shown has full details of this, but one thing to bear in mind is that effectively you've got a copy. So if then the default copy from Salesforce then changes, you'll need to apply those updates to the base components to your copies. You won't just get that automatically. There's no magical way that it'll update your code base. So here's an example of a standard component, Lightning button, with a Lightning Web local open source base components. You can have your own C-version of that. That'll be provided by default from the repository, and then you can go and change that if you want the title to behave in a slightly different fashion. API calls are receiving some love. The default allocation is up to 100,000 from 15,000, which is good, and exceeded that a few times in developer editions myself. Maximum daily limit has been removed. It was 1 million. I'm guessing people must need more than those for it to be removed, but if you're making that many requests, you might see some other performance implications. And these are usage-based entitlements, so the daily cap can be exceeded if the instance has capacity. There is a monthly cap, and you can monitor that via the setup track shown there. A couple of new security features in Apex. These are mostly going to be of interest to people publishing for the app to the App Exchange, I think. But if you're particularly concerned about permissions, they may be of interest as well. So there's a new with security enforced clause for SOCL run from Apex, and that checks object and field permissions before returning the result. So if you haven't got permission to see a field, it won't be in the result. This applies to subqueries and cross-object relationships. It doesn't check fields in the where clause, though, so you could potentially be filtering on something that you shouldn't be able to see. This is only available in Apex. And there's a new security strip inaccessible method, and that removes the fields a user can't access. So from query results, for example, or if you're carrying out DML, it would remove the fields that the user shouldn't have permission to update. Direct access to custom metadata types has been removed if the user doesn't have customized application permissions or you don't give them access via their profile or a permission set. You can disable this, but it isn't recommended. Custom metadata type visibility setting has been removed from non-packaging orgs, which you won't care about unless you're an ISV. And this is quite nice. You can clone a sandbox on a different version to production. So that'll basically allow you to create copies of preview sandboxes if you've missed the deadline for having sandboxes upgrading. So that should, that should help matters around release preview time as well, I think. Okay, that's it for generally available. We're now going to talk about a couple of interesting release features which are available in this release. There is a reason we have the caution sign here and a flag on all slides referring to beta features. These are preview features. They're not part of the services in your master subscription agreement with Salesforce. They are not supported, so if you have problems, you may well find yourself on your own. They may never go live. Smart email matching from Einstein Activity Capture is a famous example of this. It was in beta, then it wasn't there. If this happens, whatever you've built on top of the beta feature is also no longer available. And they can also be pulled at any time, not just when a major release comes out. So don't build anything mission critical around beta functionality unless you have a backup plan. Make sure you can do whatever you build, you can do without whatever you build at the drop of a hat. So why would you use beta features? Personally, I use them to evaluate functionality, make plans for how we're going to roll it out when it hopefully becomes generally available. So it's very much kind of early access, just getting you a flavor of what you can do. So first one, Einstein Voice Assistant. So this allows users to create and update records by speaking. For example, logging tasks, updating opportunities, etc. It requires a Salesforce license and it requires the new version of the mobile app, which will be updated in the middle of February. So basically, an admin configures voice skill sets, which are the common tasks for a user. The user then selects the skill and then speaks. So it sounds like you still have to press a button before you start speaking, but I guess we'll see when that finally comes out. Einstein search time conditions. So if you're doing a conversational search, you can add date time terms. So the example here is cases closed this year. Another nice Einstein search feature. There's quite a lot going on in this slide, but essentially this is hovering over a result, previewing not only the record, but also its related records. So in this case, Acme Technologies has matched the search query. Hovering over that shows a preview of the record that you can see on the right-hand side. And then hovering over the opportunities related list quick link shows the opportunities at the sort of bottom half of that particular screenshot. So yeah, you can do a lot more on that page, but it'll obviously be a little bit more of a complicated page. You can compare knowledge articles. So this beta feature highlights the differences between two knowledge article versions. So you can easily see what's changed as long as you're used to diff types of formatting. So depending on your level of experience, you might find this useful or confusing. For the developers, Lightning message service is in beta. So this allows publish, subscribe communication across Salesforce UI technologies and internal to Salesforce UI technologies. So like all those listed Lightning Web Components, Aura Components, Visualforce, the utility bar can communicate between themselves and with all the others. This is Lightning experience only, and all elements must be on the same browser tab. Which brings us to the end of our webinar, 74 slides. Well done, everyone. Well done for listening. I'm not sure I was by the end there. So as always, we've picked the items that we think are of most interest. There's a lot more to it, 520 pages, I think Clive mentioned. So the short link at the top there has the release readiness site. So that's got release notes, it's got some recordings, it's got some videos. There's also a Trailhead release badge, which is out. I've got it, which is why it's got the tick on it. That's well worth a look through as well. There's a lot of information there. I'll now stop talking and take a sip of water while Clive will tell me if we have any questions.
Well, I'd love to say we did. Unfortunately, you've obviously explained it so well.
Nothing unfortunate about having no questions. I need to save my instruments.
And this is a question to the audience. Why don't you ask here any questions? Because you'd love to put him on the spot, but obviously he's explained it so well. So no, nothing at the moment. Okay, so this is now my turn to give a gratuitous plug for BrightGen's managed services, which is what I look after. If any of you are interested in any of these features here that we can offer as part of managed service, then please do contact me direct, and I'll arrange for someone to speak with you. I mean, anything in the webinar that took your fancy or you want to know more about, we can offer a webinar follow-up from what Keir explained throughout this session. We've got a Lightning conversion suite, so if any of you are interested in converting to Lightning, we can easily accelerate that. We've got an Einstein Analytics starter package as a 4-week program, get you up and running. Single view of customer, this is a lot of interest in consolidating your Salesforce across various business units to look at single view of customer for marketing and sales. Customer communities, we're using Lightning Web Components now, which is giving us a lot more features that we can present as part of the community. Obviously, we've got skills within the service team, marketing, sales, and service cloud that we're willing to share with you. We can review and health check your org. So if you're not already a customer, and you want to know what shape your org's in, we can help you with that. And at the back of that, we can give you recommendations for improvements. You want to connect your data with integration. We've got skills in various integration tools, MuleSoft, Jitterbit, Zapier, you name it. We can probably have had some experience of it along the line. If you're looking to increase user adoption, we've got some tactics for doing that and help you to get more of your people on the platform. Continuous improvement planning as part of our managed service is ITIL based. Continuous improvement is a big feature of that, and we'll be your trusted advisors on best practice and platform guidance. If you want to know about any of that or any of the features within the webinar session, there's a free consultation that we're offering. Just give me a call and I'll arrange it. So that's my gratuitous plug for service management. So thank you all for listening. I hope you found that session useful. We'll be sending out the collateral, the recording, and the slide deck, so you can, if you want to revisit any part of it. So thanks once again to Keir. Another mammoth task completed, and thanks to you, the audience, for another mammoth listening task completed. Well done. Exactly. Great stuff. All right, thanks everybody, and we'll see you at summer.
Indeed. See you in summer.
Yeah. Take care. Bye-bye.